What experiments do you think the government is doing that we have no idea about? Story 1, I'm about 99% convinced the nuclear scare a while back in Hawaii wasn't an accident at all, but a dry run to gather data in case we get to a point where the real deal might happen. I was there when it happened. If that was on purpose, that's a really messed up thing to do. There's videos of people in Honolulu putting their kids down in sewers to get them extra concrete protection. I was working in my dorm that day, telling the residents that they were going to be okay when I had no idea it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Story 2, I was in Afghanistan, standing post. One night we were watching over this valley, and 7 different lights turned on in the sky, as bright as spotting flares. It illuminated the entire valley like it was daytime. We thought they were flares, but they stayed up and stayed bright for about 30 minutes, slowly moving both left and then right. Then they winked out, all at once. The entire time, the radio was flooded with calls from everyone top down on what the hell just happened. I was in the infantry, so I knew all about arty flares and regular flares. Even our old timers had never seen anything like it. Story 3, all these borderline conspiracy theories. While mine is pretty mundane, military and intelligence. No one had any idea about the B 2 stealth bomber or the SR-71 until they were used, and not even for a while after that with the SR-71. And there's still plenty of things we don't know about them. Lots of theory crafting on how to get a spy network or just intelligence in general into other countries, both friendly and enemy, because knowledge is power. You know, the boring stuff. Notably, Tom Clancy wrote a book that hypothesized the existence of an aircraft that matched the F-117 and prompted an investigation of the program for leaks. They found it was just him making a lucky guess. If you're talking about Red Storm Rising, it didn't really match the F-117. In the 80s, there was a gap in jet fighter numbering at F-19. Lots of people, not just Tom Clancy, were like, hey, that's weird. Maybe it's a secret jet program. And the government was like, yeah. So now it's basically accepted that that was either the F-117 or just a bait and switch tactic to waste Soviet resources investigating a program that doesn't exist. The F-19 in the book looks nothing like the F-117. The book version has circular wings and is nicknamed the Frisbee. The book version is an air superiority fighter, while F-117 is ground attack. He didn't really get lucky. He just took creative license with a semi-open government secret. Story 4, manipulating what we see and how we react. Show people sad stories. They get sad and post sad stories. Show them happy ones. They get happy and post happy. Facebook already got in trouble for doing this without user consent. I have zero doubt the government was either in on it or is still doing it. I'm surprised, but not surprised that so many people are unaware of this. I remember a few years ago there was a different article posted every day about a parent leaving their child in the car and that child dying. That crap was shared constantly. You never hear of it anymore. It still happens, but it's not as public. Facebook isn't favoring those stories in their algorithms at the moment. Story 5, I got a good one, a bad one, and a twist. The good one, survivability in a radioactive environment. I guarantee that every government is looking into ways of keeping their country running should it be hit with nuclear fallout. The bad one, making something even bigger than a nuke. The nuclear arms race wasn't about using the nukes. It was enough to just have them. That way you can use it as leverage. Well, now everyone has nukes, so we're back to an even playing field. The next step up from that would be antimatter bombs. Right now, we can make tiny quantities of antimatter in particle accelerators, but to the public's knowledge, we haven't figured out how to store it. Once we can store it and make large quantities of it, we have the ability to make bombs so devastating that they would make a nuke look like a hand grenade. The twist? The truly bizarre, messed up, and morally horrific experiments probably aren't being done by governments, but corporations. Story 6. Everything we have caught them doing in our recent past is still believably going on, because we haven't really given our government a reason to change. That includes illegal human experimentation, editors from major publications, like the NYT, being on the CIA payroll, mass surveillance by the NSA, torture at black sites. Snowden just changed the names of a couple projects and programs I think we've been being watched for decades, but we just haven't thought about it. Normal citizens were definitely watched during the Cold War, MK Ultra. Post 9/11, there was probably some fuckery at play. Today, I think it's a combination of terrorism and the political climate that is causing the government to spy on us. The country hasn't been split like this in a long time. I'm willing to bet that both parties are spying on members of the opposing party, whether said members are in power or not, to get leverage. There's no way we aren't being watched. Story 7, Geoengineering. So that if we don't get our act together before global warming gets out of control, we can do something like blast monatomic sulfur into the stratosphere or into strategic points in orbit to reduce the amount of sun hitting the planet and cool the Earth if all else fails. And as we don't seem to be getting off our duff as a species really fast, it just might. Sadly, this is one of those sci-fi Saturday night solutions right up there with Sharknado, where one solution breeds 100 unexpected and deadly side effects that taken together could be even worse. Up to the point where the concerned scientists try to storm mission control to stop the launch, screaming, "No, no, no," while President for Life Pence presses the button and launches the rocket. And everything looks great for about 2 days until the crap starts coming down. Story 8. I wouldn't be in the least bit surprised if the government is using an awful lot of our digital footprint to learn a lot more about our behaviors and, by extension, how to influence them. Take all of the recent evidence of meddling with social media for the sake of winning referendums and elections worldwide. It doesn't take an awful lot to sway the mind of the ambivalent voter, and we're really going to have our Western democracy tested in the coming decades. I don't quite see what the solution to all of this is, but it's not going to be easy. It may involve an expensive amount of research into how to properly regulate it, or it may just require my dad to come in and strike me with jumper cables. But I certainly believe that it's the biggest threat to the political status quo and the integrity of democracy. Story 9. I believe that the government can and does access our devices without our permission and doesn't give a crap about our consent. The world's social media addiction has handed corporations a regularly updated database of us, our relatives, and circle of acquaintances for free that they then sell to governments. I think that certain social movements are orchestrated by powerful people behind the scenes to enforce behavior and agendas, using our emotions and morals to move us in certain directions that make us think it was our idea all along. I also think that human experimentation is rampant and that pharmaceutical companies do it all the time, and the politicians they lobby for keep it under wraps. Story 10. Cyber psychological warfare experiments. Everyone else has teams of trolls online trying to use the internet in the United States to keep the people worked up and angry at each other. Iran has a team, Israel has a team, Russia is the team we hear most about in the news. I'm pretty sure China would have to have a team. I wouldn't be surprised if the EU and Australia had a team. The US has to have a team, but with the largest concentration of activity taking place in the US, then our team would be mostly focused on home. Story 11. Large-scale shooting massacres always seem to happen immediately following politically unquestionably crappy things the government does. They always seem to be mentally unstable individuals who were on FBI watch lists. So the idea is that the government keeps tabs on these individuals and then activates them so they'll go on a rampage. This causes the political debate to automatically shift to gun regulations, an incredibly controversial debate that has no clear political answer. This causes everyone to stop focusing on the crappy thing the government is doing and wants to continue doing. Obviously, I don't fully believe this conspiracy theory. I feel like it's worth looking into timelines of media coverage because I find it suspicious, but it's highly unlikely. Then again, MK Ultra existed. Story 12. They're conducting a large series of ongoing tests on human nature in groups, observing the effects that insularity has on the worldview of people whose minds are already fairly closed. There's a whole host of secret projects into the best way to infiltrate and control specific groups of people under the guise of similar beliefs, then utilizing what they learn to manipulate people further. Social experiments that are carried out in front of the world, but ignored by almost everyone. This is, of course, due to the default belief that I'm glad I'm not as gullible as insert whatever type of person most identified as stupid. They really can't see how much they're being manipulated. In terms of researching human nature, there's never been a better time for them. They're constantly striving for even more effective means to control how groups of people think, how to isolate and direct the thought processes of large groups of people, even though those people have access to all the information necessary to break free of this manipulation. It's really very interesting. Story 13's Supreme Court case Buck v. Bell in the 1920s ruled that anyone who was deemed undesirable or unfit to reproduce could be forcibly sterilized. This included feeble mindedness, criminal activity, deviance, poverty, epilepsy, alcoholism, etc. The ruling in the United States happened on the eve of racial cleansing in Germany and across Europe. The German state was actually jealous of the advancements the U.S. was making in eugenics. At the time, most Americans were in favor of reducing the population of the lower classes and people that were considered to be weak. Tens of thousands of people have been sterilized since the beginning of the 20th century. The Supreme Court case has never been overturned. At least 150 imprisoned women were sterilized against their will in the 2000s. Story 14. Testing viruses and cures that will be used to eliminate 90% of the population while leaving the elite and necessary humans alive. As automation keeps making jobs less and less available, there is this fantasy that somehow universal basic income is going to be a thing. It's not. In what world will those with positions of power shell out ungodly amounts of money to essentially keep a bunch of humans as pets? It's not going to happen. At some point, humans are going to become an unsustainable species, and you can be damn sure our government and others are working on ways to fix that. The first country that does this becomes an enormous resource with insufficient military to defend it. Bad plan. If such a conspiracy were to work, it would require a fully coordinated pandemic across all countries to maintain parity. That would result in many unintended consequences due to the gigantic sample size that is whole world. And it would be an impossible secret to maintain due to the scope, again, whole world. Story 15, docility. I swear this is happening in my country. When we see Paris people taking to the streets and Spanish people, and most of Europe going to town whenever they face a huge injustice in their country. I live in Ireland, and we are going through a huge homeless crisis. We've pretty much reverted back to a time when the British landlords ruled the land, and the police backed them up. That's what happened. Our state is ruled by a landlord-politician alliance, and more people are being thrown out on the streets. Currently, 4,000 to 5,000 children alone are homeless status, and that's the ones that are reported. And the cost of rent is not comparable to the salaries of most who work in service jobs or anything really. I was paying $500 per month to share a room in a crappy area that wasn't safe, but I was lucky. Some people were paying $175 to $500 a month to share a room with 20 plus people in a 3-bed house that was housing 70 plus people. It's literally gone back to the days of the tenements. And now the police are evicting people with violence and teaming up with private security. And there is an injunction trying to be passed to forbid the public from photographing the police doing these jobs, which is screwed. We're slowly turning into a police state. My Ireland is long dead. This new Ireland is crap. And the only people who care, who are willing to take to the streets and protest of pretty much anything, are the ones who would be weary of drinking our water. It's the most fluoridated water in the world, being 20 times above the recommended and normal level. They are the people who reject TV and brainwashing and are more open-minded and more willing to question crap. The rest are too docile to even care, to even question the reality of what's happened, and that is terrifying. Story 16 years ago, I signed up for the U.S. Army. First week of basic. We get a countless amount of immunization shots and pills. You have no idea what they're putting into you. They just line you up like cattle and stick you. Anyway, this one pill that stuck out to me was this little white pill that was handed to us. We were told to swallow it as fast as possible and then wash our hands immediately after. I'm no genius. I joined the Army after all, but I don't think that if I had to wash my hands after handling the thing, that it would make much of a difference after I'd ingested it. I always wondered what the F it was. I've asked around, and many of my buddies say they've never taken anything like it, or they don't even remember. I wouldn't put it past the government to try some experimental crap on ignorant recruits, most young and fresh off the street. Story 17, I believe they might be the ones instituting the wash of ads, and in turn the ad blocker on news sites and journals. It actively discourages people to read on their sites as well, since the slow death of newspapers means that independent journalism is being made hard to access, or at the very least unappealing. I mean, it also encourages something Reddit is great for: reading the headline and never the article. Discourage people from being informed or looking deeper into things. Encourage a view that journalists are just there to sell a headline by forcing them to play to that angle. Story 18: I believe the US government has been pushing way too much hidden propaganda to cover their actions abroad and make people think that the country has no faults nor has committed any questionable actions against human rights. The experiment is just to put people's eyes over unimportant and less serious matters, or to blame others and maintain the criticism as a smoke curtain. For example, the war on Syria and the Russian conflict in Crimea are more mainstream than the conflict the US brought on Libya and Yemen. These countries were devastated, and now the media and the public don't even remember them. Another big experiment many countries make is to play with history. Shaping it a certain way and not telling some parts of it can greatly influence how we humans think about our world and help us take a posture on politics. By shaping it, you can control the people's opinions. Story 19: I had a dream once as a teenager in which I came to school one day and was herded into an auditorium with the rest of the student body. There, we were offered a choice between voluntary euthanization and not euthanization as part of a national effort to reduce the population. And for some reason, half of the student body volunteered to be euthanized. I chose life and ended up sitting off to the side with the marching band, while everyone else marched to their deaths in an orderly manner. Most of the environmental catastrophes we'll be dealing with in the coming century were caused directly or indirectly by overpopulation and a series of poor decisions made by our ancestors. I think overpopulation is a problem governments will be dealing with in the coming future. In terms of the more immediate future, social engineering through social media, definitely. Story 20: I've heard from a few sources that the US military is researching mind control. I had a friend that came back from Afghanistan, and he wouldn't shut up about it. That and their use of quantum computing. Unfortunately, he ended up getting deeper into paranoia and has gotten treatment for schizophrenia. But maybe a year ago, I was listening to Dan Carlin's podcast, and he mentioned that he had it on good information from an acquaintance high up in the military that they were experimenting with mind control. Spooked the hell out of me. Story 21: controlling the human race so we are obedient to their benefit. It's been happening for so long we just believe it's the way of life. Either we are too dumb or too ignorant to see it, me included. Programming us to work our whole life, trading away time for money just to give it back to them, telling us what to buy, what we need, what's cool, then raising prices of gas, food, shelter, taxes, ECT, while the ones who really run the world most likely get everything for free. Fluoride in toothpaste inhibits the brain, lowering IQ. The news media gives us skewed facts, so we think a certain way. Paying teachers crap wages, making laws to keep prisons full. Keep us dumb, keep us on the outside, keep us obedient. Kind of like cattle. This is just the easy crap we can figure out. There's deeper things going on that we will never know. The best part is, there's nothing we can do about it. You'll read this and think it's bullcrap. I'm writing it and thinking it's bullcrap. So I guess it's working. Story 22. Every civilian invention that we think is cool and innovative, the government may have built, tested, and finalized far more advanced versions years beforehand. Things like physically enhancing exoskeletons for soldiers, laser weaponry, light bending equipment, semi invisibility, superior but microscopic audio and visual recording and tracking devices, vehicles or equipment that can enable hovering and flying, extremely capable and specialized AI, bioweapons. These topics have likely been on the table and have probably been funded to at least a small degree. The modern governments of countries like the US, Russia, and China plan for war decades in advance. Story 23. Having worked as a public servant for years, I can say that while we like to think of ourselves as a culture that no longer performs human experimentation, at least since the World War eras, I would challenge people thinking that to give it another thought. What I mean is this: in this day and age, the reason there are still intermittent and short-term care facilities, whether mental institutions, retirement facilities, and even out and inpatient detox centers, is that they offer opportunities for rehabilitation, and other opportunities for individuals that are otherwise unable to lead productive lives for themselves, for any number of reasons without various accommodations. However, if you work in any kind of care facility, you will see teams of people who decide on and implement courses of treatment and therapy for their residents, with the ultimate goal of improving the quality of their lives, whether it is through specialized therapy programs, extended care plans for need, and medications, among other things. There is inherently nothing wrong with this. However, you will notice that in many cases, it seems that pretty drastic decisions, usually on the medical level, are made on behalf of whichever clients and patients in question. Whether it is a dramatic increase in meds, for example, or changes in living situations that would normally be admonished in the greater medical and scientific communities. It can seem as if medical professionals are experimenting with medications and therapies on the clients, all under the protection of the typical status of such individuals as wards of the state, or, in other words, individuals without their own legal guardianships. Story 24. In spring of 2016, I was living in Charleston, South Carolina. I was sitting down at the living room table to eat lunch with my roommates one day, and the whole apartment started to shake. It wasn't too intense, but it lasted maybe 5 to 10 seconds and knocked the picture frames off the walls and knocked the salt shakers over and such. We all went outside and gathered with our neighbors on the sidewalk to talk about the boom we felt. We did a bunch of Googling and asked around, and the morning paper even had a quote from the US military base saying it wasn't them. When I look on the USGS website during that time frame at midday, I see no record of an earthquake. I really don't know what happened. And I still talk to my friends, and we talk about the weird occurrence. There's lots of government contractors in the area, but still being told that it didn't even happen is frustrating. Story 25, some of the technology the military, CIA, etc. keep from the public is pretty incredible. I remember reading about how smartphone plus touch screen technology was actually invented around 1990 for military purposes, but it took until like 2007 for there to be an actual smartphone on the market. I would be very amused, of course, but not that surprised if the US military slash CIA slash etc. are currently developing or have already developed a functioning invisibility cloak, semi-sentient AI robots or programs, flying cars, or car-sized personal planes for use by soldiers in battle or transportation, etc. Of course, these sound pretty ridiculous, but you never know.